Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Notre Dame, Texas A&M Week 1 matchup. Dill, this is one of those matchups that we've had circled since the month of January. And quite frankly, not just a massive matchup for both of these fan bases, but for the college football landscape. You take a look at whatever team wins this game Week 1, probably would be a pick of mine to go make it to the college football playoffs. I think both of these teams are extremely talented. Heading into 2024, some really fascinating storylines. Heading into this one, going to break down some of our key matchups, give our game picks. Until I'll say this, I've gone back and forth in terms of who I'm picking in this Week 1 matchup. I think Vegas is dead on with this spread being a point because, again, it could go either way. I might even change my pick when we preview this game the week of. Really excited to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. There has been just a tremendous amount of support during the offseason. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, you guys know the drill. Get it going in the comment section. Some people are going to agree with the boys. Some people are not going to agree with the boys. Let it fly in the comment section. That's the best part about doing these game predictions, hearing from you guys, chopping it up with you guys in the comment section. And without further ado, Dill, let's get into this one, and let's start with just some keys to the game, and let's start Notre Dame offense on the road against the Texas A&M defense that I've been extremely vocal is going to be one of the better defenses in the country. For Notre Dame on offense, what would be your number one key to the matchup for Marcus Freeman in this Notre Dame program?
I think it's going to see how these young tackles hold up, and how you obviously got to replace two great ones, and you got an interior offensive line that I think you're returning a lot of guys, but want to see a lot better production from. I think it's going to be about how that offensive line essentially holds up against the pass rush that it's a top 5 unit probably in the country. And I think why it's so important is I think Denbrock's going to want to get into some of his stuff, some of the stuff you saw that made his offenses really good at LSU. I think he's going to want to be able to push the ball down the field, challenge a secondary that's going to have a lot of transfers, have a handful of young guys, a place where maybe you can hit a big play or two against this A&M team. But that'll be predicated on if they can hold up against an elite pass rush in a very loud, hostile environment.
100%. That's exactly what I have written down in my notes too. And I think it does start with what you mentioned, Mike Denbrock. How did he have so much success at LSU? Yes, he had very good quarterback play, very good wide receiver play. He also had tremendous offensive line play. Two of the best offensive tackles in the country at LSU. He relied on that offensive line to hold up in pass pro, to be able to push the ball down the field. He's going to want to do that with this Notre Dame offense. But you look at this Texas A&M defense, they sacked the quarterback 11% of dropbacks last year. That was number 2 in the country. And I think it gets better heading into the 2024 year. You take a look at Nick Skirt and Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart, Cassius Howell, 4 guys that I think very well could be top 100 picks in the NFL draft in a couple of months. It comes down to pass protection. And you said it, it is going to be extremely loud in Kyle Field. Can this offensive line that has 2 new offensive tackles deal with some of these elite edge rushers on the outside? That's by far the biggest storyline. And Dill, you kind of get into how can Notre Dame maybe mitigate some of this pass rush. It's probably going to be running the football, staying kind of on schedule, not allowing Texas A&M to kind of pin their ears back in some of these obvious passing situations. And you inject Riley Leonard into this offense, I think it gives you a little bit more juice in the run game, right? Sam Hartman, just not a guy that can get it done with his legs very often. Riley Leonard, he is that guy. We saw Mike Denbrock very much lean on a guy like Jaden Daniels last year to facilitate that rushing attack for LSU. Can they do that for Notre Dame Week 1 against Texas A&M? Massive storyline.
And I think that having that quarterback run game is going to be important, because when I think you look at how Texas A&M is probably going to try to stop teams, I think it will have something to do with their edges crashing hard and playing on the backside. If you even just go to that spring game, you saw Skirt and Shamar Stewart, those type of guys crashing really hard, making plays from the backside. And if you can have your quarterback involved enough to keep everybody honest in that defensive line, because I think Texas A&M's defensive line, frankly, will be a little bit more athletic and maybe a little less like big and beefy. Like maybe you lose a couple of those guys from last year, McKinley, Rakes, and you still have Albert Regis, so you have some size. But I think their defensive line strategy will probably be more predicated on getting into the backfield, making plays. And I think when you have an athletic quarterback who can keep defensive linemen a little bit more honest on the backside in other areas, I think that goes a bit of a ways in allowing even freeing up some space for your running backs like Love.
And you look at this Notre Dame offense last year on paper, solid offense, right? 37.8 points per game. That was number 8 in the country, 6.7 yards per play. That was number 10 in the country. It was a top 10 offense on paper, but Notre Dame fans understand this more than anybody else. When you started banging against some of those elite defenses, Louisville, Ohio State, Clemson, that's when this Notre Dame offense really started to struggle. I have a lot more confidence in Riley Leonard. Quite frankly, as a Wake Forest guy, I remember Sam Hartman, kind of the same vibe where you're not playing top-tier teams and top-tier defenses. You really light it up. But when you kind of go to some of those elite defenses, that's when Sam Hartman started to struggle. That's kind of what happened in 2023 as well for Notre Dame. I'll say this, if you're asking me to pick a quarterback to go on the road to Kyle Field and win a massive matchup, Riley Leonard is one of the quarterbacks that you're taking across the country. This kid's a gamer and he's a winner. Now, flipping sides, you look at this Texas A&M offense going up against, again, a Notre Dame defense that very well could be a top 5 defense in the country. I think that's the story. You look at Texas A&M, Notre Dame, 2 defenses that could be extremely good in 2024. I'll ask you this, Texas A&M moving the ball against this Notre Dame defense. What's your key for Coach Colin Klein coming in running this offense?
They got to find some success on the ground. And I thought that was such a huge problem last year where they just couldn't consistently run the ball. And against some weaker teams, maybe they'd hit a couple of big plays in the run game, but they really weren't a team that could grind you down, run the ball consistently, stay on schedule. All those things kind of accumulated into having a lot of issues with pass protection, not being able to keep quarterbacks healthy and clean. I think Texas A&M needs to find a way to run the ball, and that will be the inherent challenge because you're coming in with an offensive line that didn't really do a ton in the transfer portal and wasn't particularly great last year. So again, we'll have to see. And can Colin Klein maybe even scheme some things open like he was able to do at Kansas State, where getting the ball to the perimeter a little bit better, creating creases and allowing his running backs to make those cuts. I think those are what I'm going to be looking for, because if they don't run the ball against Notre Dame, I don't see how they really
the run game, and particularly the run game outside the tackles. You look at running between the tackles on this Notre Dame team, arguably the best interior defensive line we see in the country. It's going to be tough sledding to run the ball between the tackles. Now, you look at Coach Colin Klein and some of the success that he had at Kansas State. It was getting his backs to the outside in space, letting them go make plays. And you look at the Texas A&M backfield, particularly a guy like Ruben Owens. We've had this conversation a lot. We really do like the fit with Ruben Owens in terms of how Colin Klein wants to run the football. And I think you said it best. You got to be able to run the football consistently against Notre Dame, because very similar story to what we just talked about with Notre Dame's offense. I think you have the same question marks with Texas A&M. This is not a defense in Notre Dame that you want to get behind the chains against, because one, they're really hard to throw the ball against. You take a look at the numbers last year, 53% completion percentage given up, number 3 in the country, 5.7 yards per pass attempt, number 3 in the country. It is hard to push the ball down the field, but more importantly, this is a really, really difficult unit to pass pro against, specifically on the inside for Texas.
And I think you want to put pressure on these linebackers. I think when I look at Notre Dame, secondary, unbelievably good. Defensive line, really, really good. The one question I think you have is you're probably going to be young at that linebacker spot. And if you can get them out of position, that, again, Colin Klein's been so good at doing that at his days in Kansas State, working screens and hitting perimeter run, using the quarterback in the run game. And Wigman can run. I don't think he's going to be featured like Riley Leonard will probably be featured, but Wigman can, as a change of pace, I think he can hit some of those rushing attack plays. I think that's going to be the interesting part, because, again, I don't see where else you attack this Notre Dame team besides maybe those linebackers. And if you can get them in space and make them make a lot of plays, and, again, you only have to hit a couple of them probably, because I don't see this game being particularly high scoring, frankly. No. I think that's kind of Texas A&M's avenue.
Yeah, I think you kind of said it, like the team that can hit, and both offensive coordinators coming in, Denbrock and Colin Klein, have been able to hit explosive plays. I'm kind of with you. I don't see either offense consistently moving the football. So I think
it's going to be too many negative plays. Don't you just feel like you're going to see a lot
100%. I think it really comes down to what team can kind of find some of those game-changing explosive plays. Because, again, I don't think you're going to be just moving the ball 6 yards per play. I think you got to find some big plays that can put some points up on the board? What offensive coordinator and offense can scheme up some of those plays? That's another massive storyline. Getting into our key players, Dill, I'll ask you this. For Notre Dame, one player that needs to have a game for Notre Dame to win this football game, who you got?
I mean, I think it's going to be Jack Kaiser. I think he is kind of the elder statesman in that linebacker room. I think he needs to play really, really well because again, I just don't see A&M being able to throw the ball all over the yard on this Notre Dame team. I don't think really anyone's going to be able to do that. And I'm a Wigman fan for sure, and I don't think they're going to be like anemic throwing the ball in this game. I think they'll be able to make their completions. I just don't see them being able to lean on that. I think if Jack Kaiser and this young linebacker core led by him, I would say, can control that rushing attack and prevent giving up some of those big plays or some of those misdirection plays that I'm even going to be looking for, frankly, more. Some of those screens or reverses that I think Colin Klein's been so good at hitting. I think if they can control that, I think that makes it really hard for A&M to move the ball. And then that's how I think Notre Dame's avenue to winning.
Notre Dame, key players for me, I cheated. I went with two. One, Charles Jagasaw, left tackle. Pass protection is going to be loud, which makes it very hard to pass protect with the snap count. But more importantly, this is a redshirt freshman, maybe true sophomore. I don't know how many games he played last year. Regardless, second-year offensive tackle going up against legitimate NFL caliber edge rushers. Can you hold up in pass protection? And then number two, it has to be Riley Leonard. The difference between Notre Dame last year and this year is I think you have a gamer at quarterback that can show up in these big games that Sam Hartman just really didn't. So Riley Leonard, a key for me. And going to Texas A&M, Dill, I'll ask you first, key player for Texas A&M.
Yeah, and this might be a little bit cheating as well, but I think it'll be that combination. Whatever safety duo they have, my hunch is it's going to be Ratcliffe and Brooks. I think those two need to play really well because, again, I think when you look at what Denbrock's going to want to do, I think you're going to want to see him come open this offense up. I think Texas A&M's interior or their front seven should be fine. I don't see Notre Dame just hammering it on them and beating them over the head with that. But if they can prevent those big plays, I think, again, I just think big plays are kind of going to win this game. So I'm kind of looking at where each team has it. I think A&M can't have the bust and coverage that they had last year from that safety spot. I'm looking at those two. I think
that was Texas A&M's Achilles heel last year. I mean, they were very good getting after the passer. They were very good against the run, only 3.3 yards per carry. That was top 15 in the country. There were a lot of metrics that Texas A&M was elite in 2023. One thing they weren't really good at was stopping the big play.
But they got Elko, and Elko knows how to coach safeties, I think, as well as anyone. That Duke secondary and their ability to limit big plays against really good offenses was very impressive.
100%. I'm going to go with I think this is very clever by me, the 12th man. Bill, you look at as a Michigan fan, I remember us going to Penn State last year. It was so loud. Our offensive line just couldn't really get the snap count. We're getting off the ball low. You look at the key to the game for Texas A&M, it is getting after the passer. How can the 12th man kind of impact pass protection, potentially some pre-snap penalties, some false starts, get Notre Dame behind the chains? That's where I'm going for in terms of the most important player for Texas A&M. Dill, getting into the picket, there's a reason that this game, the line's 1 point. I mean, it is the definition of a toss-up game. I'll kick it to you first, put you on the hot seat. Notre Dame, Texas A&M, who are you taking?
I think it's Notre Dame. I just don't think A&M's offensive line. I don't see how it's ready to go deal with this Notre Dame team. I think, again, not bringing in a ton of transfers and not having played great. And they have some talent. So, again, if the staff can get them ready, we'll see. But I think Notre Dame, I love Riley Leonard. I think he's a guy who does make big plays for his team, very much the polar opposite of Sam Hartman. I think they can hit a couple of them, and I just don't see how A&M deals with this front. It's so good.
Give me Texas A&M. And I've gone back and forth probably 2 weeks ago. I was leaning Notre Dame. I think that you combine a young offensive line with some young offensive tackles with this Texas A&M pass rush being at Kyle Field. Dill, if this game was in Notre Dame, I'd probably be leaning Notre Dame, but I really do think that the crowd and the environment, name me a louder stadium across the country than Kyle Field. You're not going to have one. And so you combine that with some maybe question marks at the offensive tackle spot with some elite pass rushers at Texas A&M, negative plays, game-changing plays. Give me Texas A&M. I don't feel great about it, but that's my pick right now, sitting early July. Dill, a lot of different ways we can look at this game, moving forward. Those are some of my ways. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.